What if I told you that one of history's most powerful maritime empires started with almost no recorded history at all? The Chola Dynasty emerged from obscurity, conquering lands as distant as Indonesia, Malaysia, and Thailand. At their peak in the 11th century, their armies launched bold naval raids that shattered Southeast Asia's mighty Srivijaya Empire. In just one devastating raid in 1025, the Cholas plundered 14 cities, seizing wealth that reshaped trade forever. They controlled Sri Lanka, the Maldives, and dominated trade routes across the Indian Ocean. But despite their power, their downfall was just as dramatic as their rise. How did an empire that once ruled the seas, built temples of unmatched beauty, and influenced entire civilizations vanish almost overnight? The answer lies hidden in their incredible story, one filled with glory, conquest, betrayal, and sudden collapse. This is the story of the Chola Dynasty. You might think we know everything about a powerful empire like the Cholas, but there's one problem. There's shockingly little evidence about who they really were before the 7th century CE. Let me explain this. Historians barely have anything written down from that early period. Instead, they're forced to piece things together from ancient Tamil poems, temple carvings, oral stories, and copperplate inscriptions. That's like trying to understand an epic story from random scraps of paper scattered all over the floor. But we do have a clue. We need to go way back, around the 3rd century BCE, to a time when India was under the mighty Maurya Empire, ruled by Ashoka the Great. Now, the Cholas weren't exactly part of Ashoka's huge empire, but guess what? They were on friendly terms with him. Ancient texts from that era even mention their busy ports and thriving trade. Yes, the Cholas were already big on business long before their empire took off. But who exactly were the Cholas? Were they kings, rulers, or just a legendary family? Actually, their name itself is a mystery. Some say Chola comes from the Tamil word Chozi, meaning a new kingdom. Others suggest it relates to Valavan, meaning a ruler of fertile land. And then there's Sembian, a title hinting at their legendary ancestor, Shibi, who became famous for sacrificing himself to protect a dove. Seriously, talk about dedication! There are even cooler nicknames, like Kili, which means digger, possibly highlighting their agricultural roots. Early kings had names like Nedonkili and Nanonkili, making historians think these rulers personally connected to farming. But later on, that nickname just vanished. Maybe farming wasn't so glamorous once the empire started growing. The Chola story gets clearer around the Sangam period, roughly 600 BCE to about 300 CE, when Tamil literature was booming. Let me explain. This literature isn't just poetry, it's historical gold. It lists kings, princes, and even the poets who praised them. But here's the twist. It also tells wild legends. One famous tale is about the Chola king Kantaman, who supposedly prayed so hard that the river Kaveri magically appeared. No evidence that's exactly what happened, but hey, it's a fun story, right? We also know 2 early Chola kings from these ancient texts, Karakali and Kosanganan. We also have no clue exactly when they ruled or who came first, but they were powerful enough to get poets singing about them. The Cholas' earliest capital, Urayur, is now a neighborhood in modern-day Tiruchirappalli. Another early capital was Kaveri-Pattanam, both places bustling with trade, power, and politics. Clearly they knew where the action was. Here's something intriguing. A Buddhist text called Mahavamsa describes fierce battles between the Cholas and Sri Lankans way back in the 1st century BCE. A Chola prince named Ilalan invaded and conquered northern Sri Lanka around 235 BCE. Pretty ambitious for a dynasty that didn't yet have an empire, but then something strange happened. The Cholas vanished. No, really. For nearly 3 centuries after the Sangam age ended around 300 CE, it's as if they disappeared from history. So what happened? Around this time, a mysterious group called the Kalabras invaded southern India, pushing aside everyone, including the Cholas. The Cholas, once mighty, were suddenly refugees, scrambling for protection from stronger dynasties like the Pallavas and Pandayas. Talk about a humbling turn of events. They moved north to Telugu country, becoming minor chieftains under Pallava rulers. Historians call this their darkest age, a time of struggle, humiliation, and silent patience. But they didn't just fade away. Nope. They quietly regrouped, waiting for their moment. And that moment came. 3 centuries later, when a warrior named Vijayalaya Chola decided enough was enough. In a bold move around 848 CE, he kicked out the Pallavas and seized the city of Thanjavur. Vijayalaya's victory marked the rebirth of the Cholas Empire, and let me tell you, once back in power, they weren't letting go again. Under Vijayalaya's successors, like Aditya I and his son, Parantaka I, the Cholas rapidly reclaimed lost territories. They crushed the Pallavas and Pandyas, expanding northward. By the 10th century, they were again one of the strongest powers in South India. But the real game changer was Rajaraja Chola I, who came to power in 985 CE. This guy didn't just rule, he reshaped history. In a stunningly short time, Rajaraja turned the Chola kingdom into a full-blown empire. He built the breathtaking Brihadisvara temple in Thanjavur, still standing today as an architectural wonder. His armies conquered Sri Lanka, the Maldives, and the Malabar coast, expanding the empire across the seas. And when Rajaraja's son, Rajendra I, took over, things got even more intense. Rajendra dreamed even bigger. He stormed north into Odisha and Bengal, capturing vast territories and bringing back treasures. He built a new capital, Gangaikonda Cholapuram, to commemorate his massive victories in northern India. And just when you think he couldn't possibly do more, Rajendra sent naval expeditions far across the ocean, shaking up the powerful Srivijaya Empire in Southeast Asia. But hold on. Before we dive deeper into the astonishing overseas conquests of Rajendra and his successors, you have to wonder, how exactly did a dynasty that nearly vanished from history rise to dominate lands far beyond India's shores? Well, let's set sail and find out. You see, the Cholas didn't just wake up one day and decide they wanted to rule the seas. It was all part of a carefully plotted strategy. Under Rajaraja Chola I, who ruled from 985 to 1014 CE, the Cholas transformed into a naval powerhouse, building ships, training crews, and mapping trade routes. And guess what? It worked. By the early 11th century, Chola fleets stormed across the Indian Ocean, capturing Sri Lanka, the Maldives, and taking control of the strategic Malabar coast. But why stop there? If you ruled the waves, why wouldn't you go even further? In 1025, Rajaraja's ambitious son, Rajendra Chola I, took things to another level. He launched a daring naval expedition that shook Southeast Asia to its core. But wait, why Southeast Asia? Well, there was an empire there called Srivijaya, known for controlling the busiest maritime trade routes between India and China. The ports of Srivijaya were overflowing with unimaginable wealth. Gold, spices, and precious gems flowed endlessly. Who could resist such riches? So Rajendra assembled a massive fleet and sailed eastward. He stormed key Srivijayan cities, places like Palembang, Kedah, and Tambralinga. The Cholas plundered 14 major ports, leaving the mighty empire stunned and weakened. It was an invasion unlike any the region had ever seen before. Swift, ruthless, and devastatingly effective. Now, here's where things get interesting. Although Rajendra didn't actually take permanent control over these distant territories, his raids disrupted the Srivijayan dominance in trade. Suddenly, Tamil merchants flooded the region, muscling out local Malay traders who had been in charge for centuries. Let me explain this. The Cholas weren't interested in ruling Southeast Asia directly. They simply wanted the enormous wealth that came from controlling trade. And guess what? They got exactly that. After Rajendra's legendary raid, another Chola emperor, Virarajendra Chola, wanted a piece of the action. He invaded Srivijaya again in the late 11th century and captured Kedah in modern-day Malaysia. Though this second raid wasn't as huge as the first, it further weakened Srivijaya. Imagine being Srivijaya, trying to recover from one disaster, only to get hammered by another wave of ruthless Cholan invaders. Brutal, right? But these Chola invasions had unexpected consequences. Srivijaya's collapse wasn't instant, but the raid severely damaged their prestige and grip on maritime trade. Tamil traders quickly took advantage, stepping into the power vacuum left by the Malays. Soon, the Tamil trading guilds practically owned the seas around Sumatra and the Malay Peninsula. The Cholas may not have ruled South Asia directly, but they sure reshaped its entire economic landscape. Who needs territory when you control all the trade routes anyway? Meanwhile, back home in Southeast India, the Cholas were entering a new era. After a chaotic assassination in 1070 CE ended the reign of Athirajendra Chola, a new chapter opened under Kolathunga Chola I. Kolathunga wasn't your average Chola ruler. His father was Rajaraja Narendra of the Eastern Chalukyas, and his mother was a Chola princess. Talk about royal DNA! When Kolathunga took the throne, it signaled the beginning of the later Chola Dynasty. Kolathunga Chola I and his successors, like Vikrama Chola, Rajaraja Chola II, and Kolathunga Chola III, fought hard to hold on to their territories. Sure, they had setbacks, like temporarily losing Vengai to the western Chalukyas around 1118 and southern Mysore districts to the Hoysalas, but hey, the Cholas didn't stay down for long. Soon after Vikrama Chola ascended the throne in 1118, they struck back hard, reclaiming Vengai and Gangavati swiftly. These guys really hated losing. But the power wasn't as strong in their golden years. The empire, though still impressive, began slowly losing steam. Chola rulers from Rajaraja Chola II to Kolathunga Chola III kept things prosperous, building astonishing monuments like the Airavatesvara Temple at Darasuram, a magnificent chariot-shaped masterpiece that still amazes historians today. Yet trouble was brewing. Around 1215, during Kolathunga Chola III's reign, a devastating defeat by Maravarman Sundara Pandian II spelled disaster for the Cholas. It was the beginning of their end. Soon they were driven out of Sri Lanka by resurgent Sinhala forces. But the real chaos erupted later, as the Pandyas regained power, setting off a civil war. Imagine a brutal struggle over the Pandya throne, with the Cholas and Sinhalas both secretly backing different contenders. It was messy, complicated, and weakened everyone involved. The Cholas were slipping. Internal fights, succession struggles, and constant warfare drained their resources. Kings like Rajaraja II and Rajadhiraja II did their best, but things kept spiraling. Kolathunga III managed a short-lived revival when he defeated Hoysala generals, allied with Veerabalala II around Karavur, but even a marital alliance with Veerabalala himself couldn't reverse their fortunes. By the late 12th century, the once proud empire was unraveling fast. The Chalukyas, once fierce rivals, were fading into mere shadows. Kolathunga Chola III helped dismantle their power, but it was already too late. The Cholas themselves were weakening by the day. Pandya power surged back, reclaiming lands the Cholas had once proudly held. By 1279, the Chola Empire, once a global maritime superpower, vanished from history completely. Yet their legacy lived on. They reshaped trade routes, inspired ancient cultures, and left monuments we still admire today. And hey, if you enjoyed deep diving into this fascinating story, hit the like button, subscribe for more captivating journeys through history, and comment below to let me know which part of the Chola Dynasty amazed you the most. Don't forget to turn on notifications so you never miss an epic story, and I'll see you in the next video.